All right, mic check, I'm good. So I'm Max Ceron, CWB Association Welding podcast. Today we have a really cool guest, Welding podcast.
The show is about to begin.
Hello and welcome to another edition of the CWB Association podcast. My name is Max Ceron, and as always, I'm scouring the nation for the most interesting stories and people to bring onto the show. I am coming to you live from a hotel, in parentheses, hotel here in Hamilton. I'm on the road right now, so the video and audio is not up to the normal snuff of our usual podcast, but hey, podcast never stops and we've got to keep rolling. So we're going to be covering about 3 podcasts over the next few days while I'm on the road. And Matthew's my first one. So hopefully the internet doesn't die, Matthew. Hopefully everything keeps rolling. But I got Matthew Keep here, who's a CSR at the CWB Group. Matthew, how's it going?
Good, Max. How are you?
I'm good. I'm tired. I had a couple long days of working. I was out at ABB Robotics doing a bunch of presentations and some handshaking and, kissing babies and throwing toddlers out windows and all that cool stuff you got to do.
Hey, sweet.
Yeah, it was fun. And now I head off to Hamilton here. We've got some recordings to this weekend, and it never stops.
No rest for the wicked, Max.
Yeah, and I'm about as wicked as they get. So, what about you? How you been doing?
Good. I just spent a week and a half taking my level 2 inspector course, and I came back to a very, very, very busy work week. So I share your pain, my friend. I share your pain.
All right, Matthew. So let's start with your position as CSR at CWB Group. Tell the people, what does that mean? What do you do?
So as a certification services representative, I go from company to company and I audit their processes and paper trail for maintaining their certification. And I also test welders. Those are my 2 major job functions. Besides that, on occasion, I teach a course, right? If a client's having some issues with some welding and they don't really know what to do, before Christmas, I did a course on hardwire pulsed Inconel cladding. That was actually a lot of fun. It's been a long time since I've worked with Inconel. Yeah, and I love volunteering with the foundation for Women of Steel courses or Arcs and Sparks. That's something that sits really close to my heart. That's for sure. Those are my 2 major job functions. Yeah.
And let's go back in time now. Like where do you live right now? Where's your bum sitting?
I live in Upper Stony Creek, just outside of Hamilton.
Okay. And is that where you were born and raised, or where were you born?
No, I was actually born in Georgetown, and I lived in a little place called Acton until I was about 13. Then my family moved to Brampton. I lived there until, 5 or 6 years ago when we moved to Hamilton.
I was just in Brampton yesterday. That's where ABB is.
Yeah. Did they offer to take you to MDR?
No, we went to a place called Jake's Boathouse. It was really good.
Yeah, Jake's is all right. you can definitely eat worse than Brampton, my man.
No, I had some of the best Indian food I had in my life in Brampton. It was fantastic.
Oh, yeah. I'd say that's probably the number one thing my wife and I miss living in Hamilton is access to really good, especially Hakka. Brampton has amazing Hakka food. Hamilton does not.
So, growing up in outside of Hamilton, in smaller areas, as a kid, did you know that you were going to enter these fields? Like, how did you end up a CSR? Like, it seems like a pretty niche job, right? So, did you come in as a welder? Did you come in as just someone off the street? Because you can just sign up to be a CSR. I mean, I don't think it's optimal in my opinion, but in my personal experience as a welder, I find that the best CSRs are ones that understand welding. So what's your background getting into this gig?
So I finished my apprenticeship as a fabricator relatively late in life. I think I was already in my early 30s. I joined the technical trades, as I like to call it, as a mature student when I was 25. I got a diploma in CNC programming and then went straight into metal fabrication. I wanted to make stuff with my hands. That was big for me. And I worked at a company out in Pickering called Cometics, and we did stainless pressure vessels and nuclear fabrication there. So, you know, your understanding and skill level is pushed pretty hard because that's you're in a situation where X-ray examination is the norm. Forget visual. Visual is chump change. But you know, and then when I was there, I had the opportunity to commission, program, and operate a $1 million plasma welding machine. And after that, I just think my career just took off because I was exposed to so much more in the world of welding than just, you know, taking some flat stuff and cutting it and shaping it and putting it together. So I got my red seal and pretty much went straight into supervising. Supervising led me to getting my supervisor's certification, which led me to get my level 1 welding inspector, right? I did everything from fabrication supervisor to plant manager. And this job opened up, and being part of the, not just the body that governs structural code, but I think in the world of welding, we're the influencers. We get to be like right on the leading edge of technology and recruiting, right? Oh my goodness, that's something that I love. Love going to high schools to give career day talks, or you know, even talking to instructors that don't have access or the skill level to meet some of their students' needs, especially in high school. Right. And that's where I ended up with my, literally, I tell my supervisor, this is my dream job. Right. I get to face a new problem every day and do my best to help out. You know, I'm lucky enough to learn something new every day too, which is awesome.
Now, in that space between high school and 25, what were you doing? You know, like how did you meander your way into the technical trades, like you said?
So, oh man, I worked on a dairy farm as a teenager, and then I worked in the world of residential construction for a little company. We did windows and doors and stuff. And then I got into mountain biking. And there was just something about how mountain bike builders were putting frames together, and they were how they were fabricating and the materials they were using for fabricating, and that stuff just really piqued my curiosity, right? And then the more I read into it, more I kind of decided, hey, like that's something that's really cool, you know. And then over the years, I guess my original goal probably would have been to open up my own shop and custom fabricate bikes. But the more I got into the world of specifically welding, the more interesting like metallurgy became. Right now, I'm not so much interested in making bicycles as I am maybe putting a forge and a whole bunch of other stuff in my garage and just making cool stuff with my 3 boys.
Yeah. And why metal fab then over welding? You know, I have both my welding red seal and my metal fab red seal, and they're quite different. They're quite different in what they cover. And you know, if you're looking at bikes and you're looking at the welding and you're thinking about going down that way, why did you choose metal fab instead?
I really like the fact that as a fabricator, I'm responsible from the fabrication, right? The unit from start to finish. That entire creative process is really what gets my juices flowing. There's something really, really satisfying in getting a big stack of papers that really are just a two-dimensional object. And by the time you're done, you have a useful three-dimensional object. That to me, that really spoke to me on a deep level. Now, welding, I love welding, but there's way more to the metals trades than just welding. And I love the fact that as a fabricator, right, I got to learn how to weld a whole ton of stuff, but I got to make cool stuff at the same time.
Now, one of the things that I hear a lot from my U.S. fans, we got a lot of U.S. listeners. They don't have a lot of fabrication programs down there. Very, very few, actually, and it's not an apprenticeship program in the U.S. at all. So, what would you say if you had to explain to someone in the U.S. what the metal fab program is like? What are the things you have to learn? What makes a metal fab program, like an actual course, different than, say, learning it at work from the guys at work who just show you how to do it?
So I think that in my brief synopsis, normally when people ask me what the difference between welding and fabricating is, here in Canada, the fabricator's apprenticeship is really geared towards the guy that's either going to own or run the company, right? Because your technical exposure, everything from how to develop your own drawings to producing bills of materials to doing your bend calculations or your rolling calculations and all of that stuff, how to figure out roughly how much a fabrication weighs, so you can safely handle it. That's substantially more than a welder is exposed to. Now, as a fabricator, I wasn't able to move year from year until I got another welding ticket. Right? So I didn't have to have a choice. I had to learn how to weld. But most welders don't have to learn how to fit. Most welders, they get pretty good with like measuring tape and stuff like that. But a lot of welders, if you say, hey, let's go do this bend calculation for this truncated cone and lay it out, they're going to look at you and they're going to go, sure. Yeah, we could do that. You lead, I'll snap the chalk line, right? And I just, you're exposed to so much more in a fabricator's apprenticeship. I look at my college books every once in a while, and I'm like, holy, I have way more stuff than my buddies that went into welding had.
Well, welding is a 3-year, 5,400-hour trade, and
Yep.
Well, it depends on the province, but fabricating is a 4-term, trade. So it is an extra year, really, of training, and really the first year is just a lot of welding with some simple tools, and then it kind of scales up from there.
Yeah.
Now, what part of the fabrication world did you find difficult?
Oddly enough, moving to structural was difficult for me because coming to the world of structural, it's all about what's permissible according to the code. And when you do a nuclear work, perfection is permissible, right? So I would come home. My wife used to give me a hard time. I would come home, even if it was an 8-hour shift, and I'd be wiped physically, mentally, because this is your focus for the whole day, right? But that's it. There's nothing else. So, yeah, reading drawings was easy, but wrapping my head around what's permissible inside a weld, that was a really hard thing for me to do. And I think today, I was able to take that and turn it into helping people understand the difference between visually acceptable and visually appealing. The two are not synonymous, right? But in the world of nuclear fabrication, because so many of the welds are there for the public, they have to be visually acceptable. You have to put a lot of hours in before they become visually appealing, right? So, there's you can't expect to be perfect on day one. I have failed hundreds of weld tests in my career, and you just whatever. It's a weld test. Get over it. Do it again.
Yeah, as a welder first, um, I honestly can't say I failed hundreds. I don't even know if I failed five in my entire career. I think I may have failed a couple stainless in maybe my first 6G, and I think that's
Mm,
about it my entire life. But I mean, I went into welding first, right? So like, I mean, I learned those hand skills first before I had a fabricator in a shop kind of put me under his wing and say, "Hey, you're really good at math." That's what he noticed. Like, you're really good at math. And if you're really good at math, you could probably do more things because that was kind of the dividing line, and if you're
mm.
looking at someone who's coming up to you and saying, "Hey, I want to get into fabrication," what would you say that that's important, or what other skills would be applicable, that to make a
Mm.
good fabricator?
So just like Toyota, the ability to think three-dimensionally. I don't know if you know this, but Toyota, as part of their recruitment technique, they do a series of testing, and the big one for them is actually taking a two-dimensional drawing and understanding what a three-dimensional object looks like. So when I go to like high schools specifically, my two opening questions are when I walk in the room: who likes math, and who likes physics. Those are two really important things, because to become a good fabricator, you have to have a good grasp of physics, right? Because you're going to be stuck moving stuff around or working with things that are not particularly user friendly. Like maybe it's a couple 100,000 pounds, or it's a weird shape. And then I have to tell them, I failed grade 11 math 3 times in high school, right? My wife never fails to remind me that as a fabricator, more than a third of my job was math, right? Uh,
So what
but
was the
hey,
difference? What was the difference? Why did you fail math three times
I didn't
and then
care.
do it for a living?
I didn't care. In high school, it wasn't I was like, what the heck? And then all of a sudden, I got the chance to like physically form stuff to become useful for what I was looking for. And I was like, heck yeah. If doing this math means I get to play with fire for a living, yeah, of course I'm going to do that. Because who wouldn't want to play with fire for a living?
Yeah, as an educator for 8 years in the college system, the number one complaint I had from industry was students couldn't do math. And they go through math in school. They take math courses every semester. It and
Yeah.
and like they'll pass. And I'm not sure what the disconnect is. It's like you learn it in school, but it doesn't stick. Like, it doesn't seem to stick because as soon as they get onto industry, they get on site and the boss is saying, "Okay, grab your tape measure, lay this out and then divide it by
Mm.
three," or you'll put down 8 nozzles equally spaced across this surface, and the balloons pop inside. So like, what is it? What is it that makes that so hard?
Yeah, I don't know. I was at a high school the other week, and the instructor said that's their number one problem. So they actually teach. It's a high school just around the corner. They expose the students to like manual machining equipment, CNC machining equipment. They have a little brake press. They have a little set of rolls. So the students are exposed to all of that, but none of them understand the math. I'm like, you just most of the time it just takes time. You have to let them understand that that is a part of the creative process. And once they do, like once they make their first, I don't know, form, fit, and welded project, I'm like, trust me, the ones that enjoy it, they're never ever gonna let it die. They'll just keep going and going and going.
And do you recommend people take a course? Because like, I mean, I'm a bad example. I challenged my red seal for welding
Yeah.
and I challenged my red seal for fab, right? Like, I didn't go to school. I just walked in and wrote the tests and passed. And that I don't think is ideal. I became a teacher down the road and I would not recommend that path, you
Yeah.
know. Would you, in your experience, recommend people sign up and go to school, apprentice, and do the whole shebang, or
Oh yeah, absolutely.
or what do you see in your work life now in terms of what you see out there in industry?
So for starters, I always suggest that people check out a college. There's a really great one here in Ontario, Conestoga, and it's not because I'm an alumni from there. It's because they still have a whack ton of teachers that sit on the Red Seal board. You want to talk about a tough go through a college program? Those guys know what they're talking about, and that means that you're what you're exposed to in the classroom is relevant. Their wet program is also one of the best in Ontario at the very least, if not, over a majority of the country. And they have students like that are handpicked for companies like Liberty, right? You want to talk about companies that are doing some cool welding? Yeah, talk to Liberty. They do some really neat stuff. But industry, I think, is starting to realize that post-pandemic, the number of people leaving the workforce is like astronomically high, and they're not pairing, like the young people with the senior guys the way they should. And there's a double whammy to that. One, all of a sudden labor rates become artificially inflated, but two, and even more importantly, people are working way past when they should be. Right? How many shops do I go to and the senior welder or fitter is in his late 70s, but they can't find anybody to replace him. Right? And in that way, if you're young and you're interested, I tell these young kids, like, here's a bunch of companies where you can do high school co-ops, and if you do well there, then ask them if they want to put you in an apprenticeship program. And if you're a creative personality, then definitely consider the fab one, right? And I think sometimes people need to realize, as a whole, industry is moving away from just hiring wire burners, right? The old school, I'm just here to weld all day long. And they're looking for people with a little more
Skills.
A little more technical savvy, right? So they're looking for more fabricators. Most of my clients in Hamilton, Burlington, are more interested in hiring fabricator welders than they are welders.
Yeah.
Because that's as semi-automation and automation become the norm, you have to have the technical skill to go behind them, right? I know a lot of people talk about how a robot's going to replace a welder. Well, I hate to break it to you, not in my lifetime. Because
I just spent 2 days talking about how that's not true. If anything, automation creates more need for welders. Like, it's gonna really up the game, like, for more welders. In the US right now, the statistics are 300,000 job openings for welders in the US. And in Canada, we're sitting at about 23,000 job openings right now. Like,
it's
that's
crazy. Because, a machine will only deal in absolutes. It can only work in zeros and ones. So if there's an issue with fit up, right, it's not going to be able to compensate for that because it's not in its program. So that's when welders come in, because they're the operators and they're going, oh, wait, I can adjust this and adjust that. And oh, look, now it works great. Right. But then you can have more productive hours in a day as well. Right. Like that plasma welder I got to run as an apprentice, right? I was doing 44 to 4,800 linear feet of weld a month on that thing, right? A good hand welder is doing like 800, right? So if you think about it, and the company I was working for, they actually bought a second unit because they weren't even able to keep up with production.
Yeah.
Right. So, but you had to have, I wasn't even allowed to work on that thing until I had my second all position TIG ticket. Because you had to understand the process. You don't understand the process, man, this rework is really expensive.
Yeah, there's nothing worse than rework. There's absolutely nothing that kills a business more than rework.
Oh man.
So let's take a break now. We'll go to our advertisers and they can get their commercials in. And after the break, I want to talk to you about your current journey and kind of what you see in the daily life of a CSR. So everyone stay tuned. We're going to be back here with Matthew Keep from the CWB Group, and make sure you pay attention to our fantastic sponsors.
The CWB Association is new and improved and focused on you. We offer a free membership with lots of benefits to anyone interested in joining an association that is passionate about welding. We are committed to educating, informing, and connecting our workforce. Gain access to your free digital publication of the Weld magazine, free online training, conferences, and lots of giveaways. Reach out to your local CWB Association chapter today to connect with other welding professionals and share welding as a trade in your community. Build your career, stay informed, and support the Canadian welding industry. Join today and learn more at cwbassociation.org.
And we are back at the CWB Association podcast. I'm here with Matthew Keep. I'm Max Ceron, as always, following the discussion. So in the beginning of the show, we were talking about, how you got into this a little bit late. You came into it you did a little bit of CNC programming, you did a little bit of machining lifestyle, got into fabricating, worked your way through kind of a meandering route into your current position here at as a CSR. Now, let's just jump to right before that. I guess, why did you apply to be a CSR? It sounds like you had a pretty good job. Like things were going pretty good.
Yeah, I think so. As soon as I understood as a tradesperson what the CWB was actually doing, I'm not going to lie, I wanted to work for the Bureau because I always looked at what the Bureau was bringing to the world of welding. I'm like, man, I would literally be willing to sell a body part to become part of that.
Which one?
Probably a kidney. Because
wow, that's I would have started with a pinky or something.
No. I got to have the right amount of revenue, okay?
Maybe an ear, I don't know.
Well, sure, although they don't work anymore. I think there was just a desire to be, like I said earlier, an influence, a positive influence on something that I love doing. I got paid great to do it, and there was always some sort of professional enjoyment, not just fulfillment, but enjoyment. It was fun to do. I've had the opportunity to work on like really big stuff down to really little stuff, right? Stuff that was literally 200,000 or 300,000 pounds of steel down to like I had a job once where we were making custom built jewelry cases. Super cool, right? Yeah. And it was a weird path, but and it took me almost 10 years to get into the Bureau. And then
so when you say that, do you mean you were applying over and over to try to get in, or?
Oh yeah. So my wife actually started to make fun of me a little bit because she's like, "Oh, come on, seriously, another one?" I'm like, "Yeah." But when I interviewed, I was informed that really what they were waiting for was for me to get some teaching experience. So over the pandemic, I actually taught an entire term at Mohawk, and it was all practical welding. So I guess that was all I needed.
Now, you say about that's all you needed. As a CSR, when you started working, what were the first sets of skills that you realized were going to help you be a good CSR? Like first gig out, you're like, okay, you do a little bit of shadowing, like in the process, as a CSR, and you follow other CSRs and meet their clients and see the process. What were those skills that you were like, okay, this will serve me well?
probably understanding the welding processes most, right? Like what works for a company, what doesn't work. Uh, I spent a lot of time over my career really trying to maximize my arc-on time, right? My ultimate goal as a supervisor, even plant manager, was to get as close to 80% as possible. That's how the company makes its best revenue, 80% arc-on time, right? Now, I don't have the right to tell you how to tell my clients how to run their company. And that's not that's not even fair. But I can tell you what worked for me, right? And I've worked, like I said, everything from multi-million-dollar companies, right, where I was an apprenticeship, down to like companies that are doing, less than $2 million worth of sales a year, right? So you see the whole variety of what's out there, but yeah, understanding welding and its processes and just being easy to get along with, which is odd because, generally speaking, I'm not that much of a people person. But when it comes to like what I love to do for a living, I will share until I'm blue in the face. Because my mentality as a manager was always like, I want you to have the skills to one day be able to take my job. Because that's important, because I'm not the only one that can be successful. So those are probably the two big ones. Time management is also very important. So I had 1, 2, 3,
And then
three appointments.
Sorry, go ahead.
Oh, I had 3 appointments this morning, and then I left a meeting early to join this one, and then I'm going to go teach this evening. So, yeah.
But those aren't all expectations of your CSR role, are they?
Oh, heck no. No, you
Right.
got to be able to find balance, right, and give back, because otherwise, if I can't share my skills and knowledge with another generation, then why in the world did I bother to become, a member of an organization that thinks that's super important?
Yeah. What were the couple of the most shocking things as when you became a CSR that you're like, I didn't expect that, or I didn't see that coming?
How wearing the blue patch on my shirt would intimidate the living daylights out of almost everyone every time I've walked into a shop. I think that's something that still to this day just floors me, because I'm not there to be an enemy. I think when I do test sessions for the foundation, I make a point of not wearing any branded clothing. Walk in just like another welder, carry my glove, my helmet, my welding jacket, right? And I drag my little CSR's bag in. And for a lot of those sessions, I won't even open my bag for the first hour, because I want people to be relaxed, right? Because there's more than enough pressure as a welder and fabricator. But then when you're like participating in a program, and it's like a second careers program or an introduction to welding, like you can feel the blood pressure, right? It's like up here when you walk in the door. And I don't know, I'm not that kind of guy. I want people to be successful, right? I'll bend over backwards to help you be successful as long as you're doing the work, right?
Yeah.
And I would have to say, that is the one thing that just blew my mind as a CSR. Like everybody would be like, "Oh, do you want a coffee, sir?" I'm like, "Don't serve me. Okay, it's Matt or nothing." Yeah.
Well, that's decades of that being an issue, right? Like growing up as a welder my whole life, it was like, here comes the police, here comes, the guy that's going to come into my shop and tell us that we're doing it all wrong, even though he's never done it before.
Yeah.
Wonderful, and it would be, and then of course you come across some good CSRs that are like nice, but there's always a barrier there. There's always a line of regulation that is uncrossable. Like the CSRs always made it really clear that they can't tell you what to do. they can't actually assist you because that's like cheating.
Yeah.
They can only be there to invigilate and support what the code
Yeah.
allows to support, which is not a lot.
But we are welding, and I want welding to become something that's fun for a lot of people, right? Just because you have to follow a specific code doesn't mean you can't enjoy it. As a matter of fact, generally speaking, the people that love welding, they instantly get drawn into supervisory roles or whatever because they just enjoy it. So they're always looking at ways to improve what they're doing, right? My favorite phrase is, as a really good welder, your ultimate goal should always be that your next weld is better than your last.
Yeah,
Right.
and I mean that's Art Junkies, my friend Jason. He ends his podcast with that. Always
Yeah.
make your next welder better than your last, and it's true. Like, I mean, and plus, we're such a highly invigilated trade. There's not a lot of leeway. I mean, we do more tests than doctors. We do more tests than lawyers. They,
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
we get invigilated a lot more than most any other jobs that exist. More than
Mhm.
pilots. More than surgeons. So.
Talking to people like Stephanie Hoffman or Ray Ripple, right? I love talking about those two specifically because artists have a way of pushing the boundaries, not just of their creativity, but also the physical capabilities of their equipment, right? Which means that equipment manufacturers also have to improve what they're doing, right? So, I mean, that gives us stuff like Fronius's CMT, which is, let's face it, cooler than cool, right? Or pulse on pulse aluminum welding, right? I don't know. Have you ever watched any of those YouTube videos of the Fronis techs making their machines sing, like play Star Wars music and stuff like that?
Yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah.
That's what nerds like me do when we're bored. Because why not?
Now, in the past, like how long have you been a CSR now?
Just over 2 years.
And in these last 2 years, how much do you feel you've had to learn as a CSR, on the job in terms of developing your technique, what you thought you would be in the first couple of weeks of a CSR to what you have to be now?
Oh man, probably the number one thing is patience. Uh, I encourage a lot of welders to slow down, and sometimes that means I need to slow down too.
Has there ever been like some meltdowns? Like is there ever, like I've witnessed meltdowns in people fail and things get freaking pretty tense. Have you been pretty lucky in your 2 years and haven't had to deal with much of that, or has there been a couple memorable moments or a memorable moment?
Oh, there's definitely been a couple memorable moments, and there's only so much I can do to maybe adjust their their bias towards thinking that that jerk from the bureau just wanted to fail me. But at the end of the day, it's very little about the individual, and it's more about making sure that I'm protecting what our industry and code stand for, right? And generally speaking, once people have had the opportunity to speak their mind, then you can have a rational conversation, right? And it's, as long as they understand it's not a personal thing. I'm not out to get you, right? But you have to understand that this is what the code says is acceptable. So that's what we have to follow.
And
Right?
they know, like I mean,
Oh yeah.
they're prepped, right? It's not like welders walk into these tests not knowing what the hell is going on, right?
Yeah. And if they do, oh dear me.
Now, what about in terms of the final portion of the test? This is something that in my career, when I was young, everything would get X-rayed. We would send things off to get X-rayed. Things would get X-rayed, and you'd have to wait. And in the last 15 years, 90% of the places I go to and I work with, you bend on the spot, and you just get it done with, and you find out right then if you pass yay or nay. In your world with your customers, your region, what's the ratio? Or is there more X-rays? Or is there more on the spot bends? What do you feel is more common for you?
It's probably 50-50.
And what do you
So
like better?
I like X-ray better. I like the fact that our current provider, they use a digital X-ray system. So if there's an issue, right, the welder can ask for a picture of the weld. I actually keep a picture of 4 coupons on my desktop so that I can show people what a film looks like and how accurate the computer is in telling you whether or not your indication is bigger than the 3 mil allowed, right? However, last month I had a session where the inclusion measured 3.2 mil, and I looked at the film and I said, well, I'm going to suggest that you pay the extra money and you ask for it to be bent. And he's like, why? I'm like, no. Trust me, I can almost guarantee you that's a little bit of mil scale on the bottom of the backing bar. So why not? It's an extra, what, $38 plus shipping and handling, yada, yada, yada. And lo and behold, it passed. Right? But I got to tell you, generally speaking, shops have a very hard time in comparing their ability to cut, grind, and bend coupons for less than $34 a plate, which is what it costs for X-ray. Right? You'd have to do a lot of plate cutting, grinding, and machining to even that out. Just your hourly, right?
Yeah, like most places I've worked at, we'd all have to cut, back out, cut, and there's no machining. We're gouging off with torches, which takes a minute. Like people, or like you take your backing plate off the torch, it's literally the fastest way. There is no faster way than with an oxy-fuel torch, and it reheats it and anneals it if you want to get real specific. But but in my experience, X-rays are way easier to pass because if you got a 3 mil indication, you got a 3 mil indication. But if you got a 3 mil bubble or porosity and you bend around that, she's opening up.
Yeah.
So, I've always thought that X-rays are easier to pass. I may or may not be wrong, for the people, the masses to decide. And we at the colleges, we bend everything right in front of them because it's more likely to fail. Like a 16th will open up to more than an 8th, right? So, So the bend is tougher.
I still think that bending is a very valuable tool. So even the shops that I go to that send their plates out for X-ray, they still have a bending jig because when they're practicing, I'm like, you have to make sure that as the welder gets their plates, they prep their plates, they tack their plates, right? They weld their plates. QC comes to see their stop starts, right? QC makes sure that the cap pass isn't too high, and then the welder has to take off the backing plate and cut them into coupons and grind them and bend them. And all of that, then they have a much better understanding of what goes into their weld, and the feedback is immediate, right? Instead of waiting 2 or 3 days for your results from X-ray, if the plates go out right away. Sometimes that's an issue too, right? But I have lots of places that they could bend their own plates, but they choose to focus more on maintaining production, right? Because they make sure they test well within the 180 days allowed by the code. So then their plates all go out for either bends or X-ray, and a majority of them are X-ray.
And the $1 million question people always ask, and as a CSR, you're going to have the perspective from your industry, your area, what people are welding, but what's the number one plate that fails? I know in the schools, which is the number one plate that fails the red seal, which is the flat open root MIG. That's the number one failed plate on the red seal exam. which people always scoff at the MIG test, but it's the one that fails the
Oh
most.
man,
But
that's
what do
still
you
the
see?
number one failure.
Yeah.
So hardwire on the 10 mil plate, figure 8. Oh yeah, no, that one still has probably an 85% fail rate. And I think the more you talk to companies about it, the more they understand the physical limitations of the wire, right? I normally tell my clients, you don't have to ditch hardwire, but why do it the hard way? You're already using metal core, right? You're only using hardwire and flat and horizontal, so make your life easier, right? Keep the hardwire for the thinner gauge stuff. You gotta remember 045 is supposed to max out at a 1/4 inch.
Yeah, but
You're taking it all the way.
metal core is not as prolific in WPSs commercially, and also is more expensive. So an LS6 is still cheapest wire out there, and you can buy it. And you can buy it by the barrel, right? You can buy the 500 kg barrel.
Oh, you can buy metal core by the barrel,
but you don't get the discount, not nearly as much.
And that's when you can have the conversation about your ROI for arc on time, right? And I have probably 3 or 4 clients in the last year that have moved from hardwire to metal core, and they're like, "Dude, it's crazy." I'm like, "Yeah, I know.
It's a nice wire.
Cleaner.
Yeah.
There's not as much smoke. If you set it up just right, there's not as much spatter. I mean, for me, there's just too many perks, right?" And I will readily confess I'm not a wire fed guy. Okay, stick, TIG, sub-arc to a degree, plasma. I love plasma welding. That's my jam. But MIG if I have to, flux core same deal if I have to. Metal core, oh man, I could weld metal core all day. I think that's a beautiful wire to use.
But
coincidentally,
does metal core fall under an S class, or what kind of class ticket is metal core? Because it doesn't metal core match with flux core and solid wire match on its own.
Yeah. So metal core, flux core are synonymous. I would suggest normally that you only use metal core flat and horizontal. Yes, I have engineers that tell me you can use it in all positions. However, I like my skin, because if I tried to run metal core vertical upper overhead, I would not have much skin because it would be all blistered off my body. Right? But so you can have a flux core metal core ticket for flat and horizontal, and guess what? You can swap between the two of them. Right? But yeah, and also the annexes have made a big difference too, right? So now you can test to Annex J, and you can test on let's say 18 gauge to be qualified from 20 gauge all the way up to 3 mil, which is 1/8, right? So then why wouldn't you use your hardwire for that? Because that's where it's going to shine, right? In those thicknesses, and then just use a separate certification for everything over 3 mil. Right?
Yeah, okay. Yeah.
There's all sorts of ways. I remember my first welding supervisor, he made us test on 1.25" sked 80 extra heavy. Right? So your root pass went in about 16 seconds, but your cap pass was almost 3/4 of an inch wide, right? Jerk. But it covered us all the way down to 3/4 1/16 wall to unlimited thickness. So I get it.
Your max out's huge, yeah.
Right? So totally. But if there are ways to make your life easier, why not?
Now, in terms of you working with shops and clients, what are some of the things that you would like to see companies do to make your job easier? Let's say Uncle Bob's Welding's getting into the CWB game, and they're going to reach out to you for the first time to say, you know what, I want to get some tests here. We're going to get some. I'm thinking about certifying my shop, doing the audit process. What could they do to make your job easier?
understand the requirements of certification. Right now, the number one stumbling block for most of my clients is finding or training a welding supervisor, because with the lack of labor, as soon as you have someone, generally speaking, who gets that certification, right? If they're offered another like 48 cents at another company because that company is looking for a supervisor too, they're gone, right? So I think I would love to see more people understand the value in making sure they are paying their staff appropriately to retain people, right? Like currently, I think the labor rates for someone with no experience in Hamilton and Burlington, which is my area, are ridiculous, right? I do, because it's unattainable for some companies. But the companies that understand it and work with their staff to maybe bridge that gap a little bit in other ways, right? They have staff that'll probably retire, and they got staff that are as young as 25, right? Which is awesome.
Mm-hmm.
But I would love it if generally speaking, people understood what it means to start that certification journey, not just the end goal, right? What do we? You have the A to Z people, and you have the B to Y people, right? I wish more people were B to Y people.
All right, well, this has been great information and a great interview, and we're coming up on the end here. But for a final question, where do you see your journey going to? Do you see yourself as a CSR for the next 10 years, 15 years till retirement? Are you looking to get into other gigs, side hustles? What's your future state look like?
Well, I'm not going to lie. I might consider retiring from the Bureau when I'm 85.
There is a couple CSRs in their 80s in Canada. There is.
Yeah, I know. Mostly because I can't believe I can have this much fun and get paid to do it. That to me is awesome. Do I want a side hustle? Yeah. I'm probably going to do like some blacksmithing in my garage. I have 3 boys, and my youngest is very interested. So I'm looking to sign him up to do a knife making course out in Simcoe later this spring. Maybe someday I'd love to get my level 3 inspector. But I'm not in a rush. I think I get to have a lot of fun. I have some amazing clients. I have great relationships with a bunch of my clients. Heck, DeFasco is one of my clients, right? And I got a whole bunch of clients that do work for DeFasco. So I'm like, okay, let's go and walk through the mill. Hopefully we'll get lucky and we'll see a pour or two. And, that would make my heart very happy. So
I worked in a steel mill for 8 years. It's not as exciting to me anymore.
Yeah. Well, DeFasco's got some cool stuff coming up,
Yeah,
Max.
no, they all do, man. I got to watch an aluminum pour yesterday at the aluminum facility for Lincoln. That was very cool.
Oh, wow. Yeah, that would be neat.
Yeah.
Sweet, man.
All right, buddy. Well, I appreciate it. I know you got more work tonight, and I do too. So
right.
We'll be working into the wee hours of the morning, and I really appreciate you taking the time to be on the show and tell us your story and to let people know about what it is to be a CSR for the CWB Group.
Sweet. Thanks a lot, Max.
You bet. And I hope you have a wonderful night, and don't work too hard, buddy.
I'll try, but I make no promises.
All right. For all the people that have been following, Phil, thank you very much for following. We got lots of cool stuff. We are in the middle of Women Empowerment Month right now, which is here in March. And then we try to do cool stuff every month. Make sure you follow along and join and get your free membership. We got lots of free giveaways coming up following the conferences. We're already working towards Weld in October, and we got the Educators Conference coming up in June. At the end of March, we have our National Trivia Night too. So there'll be lots of cool stuff. And always follow us on Instagram. We've got lots of stuff happening on all our socials. So thank you and stay tuned.
We hope you enjoyed the show.